This is AM Agenda. Joining me now from Melbourne, Labor MP Kelvin Thomson, and in Brisbane, Liberal MP Steve Chobo. Gents, thanks for being there. Kelvin, this result on Saturday was just a disaster, and it shows for Labor that its brand is toxic, doesn't it? How do you turn that around in Queensland and more broadly?
Well, Kieran, who knew there was an election on the weekend? Nobody tells me anything. But I think that the real issues in relation to state elections, not just the Queensland one, but the New South Wales one before it, the Victorian one before it, have gone to the consequences of the rapid increase in population following the increase in migration since 2004. So you've seen difficulties with infrastructure provision, traffic congestion. You've seen increases in the cost of living with housing affordability problems, electricity doubling, council rates, gas, water and the like. And you've also seen planning issues with residents not being given a say in what's occurring in their own neighbourhoods. They've turned out to be key issues in consecutive state elections, and for as long as we continue to run the migration and population growth policies that we do, they are likely to continue as major issues, particularly at a state level.
You don't think Labor's lost touch with its base here? We've got a vote of, we've seen a vote at the weekend for Labor of under 30%. Extraordinary result, less than single figures in Queensland now, just awful.
It is true, they are very poor results, but the things which are driving those poor results are the factors I just mentioned: the problems with the provision of infrastructure, the problems with cost of living increases, and the issues to do with planning, with residents not being given a say and things affecting them directly. So they are the things which need to be addressed in order for us to lift our support.
Steve Chobo, Campbell Newman obviously focusing on that services, that provision of services as one of his key priorities, so he's obviously cognizant of one of the points that Kelvin makes there.
Well, I mean, the extraordinary thing, Kieran, was just hearing Kelvin when he said, who knew there was an election on the weekend? I'm not sure if he was joking or being serious, but, you know, I'm really quite concerned that the Victorian Labor members... Oh, that's good to know. But the point is really this. I mean, Kelvin's hit the nail on the head, and that is that he said that one of the primary concerns, and this is what Campbell campaigned strongly on, was cost of living pressures. And this is why we say, as a coalition, that this goes straight to the heart of the federal Labor government, which is this. Cost of living pressures are a massive issue across Australia, whether you live in Melbourne, the western suburbs of Sydney, whether you're in Queensland. And what we know is that Labor's carbon tax, the lie that brought Julia Gillard into government, is going to make all of that so much worse. And so the message is simply this, Kieran. Labor needs to listen when people are saying they are angry with federal Labor about the fact they're making a bad problem worse and not better, and we see what the results of that are. The federal news polls has Labor's primary vote on about 30%, and we saw even less than that in Queensland.
Steve Chobo makes the point, Kelvin Thomson, about the carbon tax, but I suppose if you extrapolate from that as well, it's the issue of trust on this as well, isn't it? Because Anna Bligh punished at that election for breaking a promise on the privatisation of assets. The electorate remembered it right till the ballot box, and they unleashed their retribution on her. There's a similar parallel, isn't there, on the carbon tax federally?
Well, I think the point here, Kieran, is that asset sales and privatisations have almost invariably turned out to be a bad idea and have turned around to bite those who do them on the bum. That's happened in other states as well as in Queensland. It happened to Jeff Kennett in Victoria. It's happened to Labor elsewhere. In relation to the carbon price, it is something which is going to happen from the middle of this year, and people will make judgments about it once it has happened.
But it's the trust issue. It's the trust issue. It's the broken promise. That's what I'm asking you about. Do you think that a leader can turn that around, or once people stop listening, that's it?
I know commentators get very exercised about process questions. The point I wish to make is that we are introducing a car.
Is that a joke? We are. A lie before an election is now a process question. I mean, seriously.
The point I am making is that we are introducing a carbon price from the middle of this year, and people will have the opportunity to see how it impacts on them. The increases in pensions, the support for families, the support for jobs, the total package. People will have the opportunity to see it. And the parallel here is really with John Howard's GST, which was introduced in the middle of 2000, and certainly for the first period of time there were difficulties with it, but by the middle of the following year it had been implemented and the political caravan moved on. The Liberal Party did perfectly well in the Aston by-election, and so people had the opportunity to see it.
For the Prime Minister, do you think it's possible for her to turn this around in time, that at the state level this might actually benefit Labor, that people have, you know, unleashed their retribution, they've used their baseball bats at a state level, and that they might hold back on you federally? Because really, to be honest, you look at the polling, it shows that there's not much likelihood of that. They're readying to boot you as well.
Well, again, you need to recall a little bit of history. I remember being in the Victorian State Parliament in 1992 when Jeff Kennett had a crushing victory over us. It was 61 seats to 27, and everyone did their sums and said, oh, Labor will lose this many seats at the forthcoming federal election in Victoria. In fact, we didn't lose any seats in the 1993 federal election, held only a few months later. We won seats because Jeff Kennett went berserk with asset sales and public service job cuts, tax increases and the like. So it is unwise to simply extrapolate the state result and assume that doom and gloom for Labor federally in Queensland.
Steve Ciobo, I want to ask you about foreign investment. You heard what Barnaby Joyce had to say. It looks like Tony Abbott agrees with the Nationals on this. Some of your Liberals won't be happy about tightening the rules on foreign investment for agricultural land. A number of them have already expressed concerns about that.
Well, Kieran, I reject the notion that there's a Liberal Party view and a National Party view. I mean, that's not the case. What there is a discussion around whether or not FIRB, that is the Foreign Investment Review Board, should be having a look at the purchase of agricultural land and at what stage that should kick in. So it's not that there's one view and another view. What there is a discussion about at what level that national interest test should kick in. Now, Tony made it clear on the weekend that he thought it should be a little bit lower than it currently is. But look, we're going to put out a discussion paper on this. Ultimately, people will make a decision based on, you know, the alternatives that are put forward. But I just want to pick up on one thing, Kieran, that Kelvin was touching upon. Well, just as this issue of trust. I mean, I think that even more important than these questions of policy, central to any government is that question of trust. And the fact is, people have lost their trust in Prime Minister Julia Gillard.
All right, Steve Ciobo, Kelvin Thomson, thanks for that. Appreciate it. We're going to cross live now to Seoul, South Korea. The Prime Minister's arrived there overnight.